In three, two, one. What's going on, folks? Welcome to 34 Questions. I'm your host, 34, and tonight we have a very special guest in the building, Andrew E. IIR is with us. How you doing tonight, Andrew?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, man. Want to wish you a happy Wednesday. I hope your week's been going pretty well. For the folks out there, and I don't know if you know this, Andrew, but I've been on hiatus for like about 5-6 weeks now. So you're my first guest after that hiatus. So I'll be brushing off a little of the dust and the cobwebs. But I just want to thank you again for stopping by. And for the folks out there who are unfamiliar with the flow of the show, we will typically do first a warm up. After the warm up, we'll head to the icebreaker, and then after the icebreaker, we'll turn to the Wheel of Fate, which is the main course of this podcast. And after the Wheel of Fate, we will head out to some closeout questions. Sound good to you, Andrew?
Yeah, sounds good.
All right. Well, my first question for you, man, is how are you? How you been? You've been doing well. You've been doing great. How you been lately, man?
I'm good. Just getting through the job hunt and
How's the job hunt going? You've been feeling cool about it?
yeah, I got some things I'm excited about, but I gotta wait for them to finalize. But if things work out, then yeah, I should have trying to get a security job, and I'm waiting to hear about translation work and
I
a couple
see.
other things.
Are you like completely getting into a different industry from like your previous work, or yeah, go ahead.
Well, it's tough to say with me. I've done a little bit of everything, but I was full time in security work, and then lost my position, but working on getting another one. In the meantime, I had started counselor training, so I was able to get that, and then
Like student
I
counseling, if you don't mind me asking, or
oh no, it's fine. Like it's called a peer advocate counselor.
interesting.
So yeah, it's with a local community center, and so while I was working on that, I also was able to find some translator opportunities. So
That's
I
what's up.
got
Yeah, I mean, I met you, I think, and the first time I met you, we had talked about your translating abilities, which I think is bananas, man. Like, I don't know if that just came natural to you, but I feel, go
yeah
ahead. It does? It comes
yeah.
natural to you?
Well, I I always had a hard time in school, and it got to a certain point. Like I wasn't doing well in math or science, so I just, when I was required to take a language and it worked, I was like, I better keep on this because it's keeping the GPA up.
Ah,
So
I got you. I think
yeah,
you had
when
mentioned that too. Go ahead.
oh yeah, just I wasn't doing well in the traditional areas, and then I just accidentally found out that language was a
A
budding
strength.
proficiency. Yeah.
A
I guess I'd like to say that.
talent, a strength, man. I don't know if I told you I work at a high school, right? And
Yeah.
one of these theories I've been trying to like expose the kids to is this thought of, it's a theory that everyone's a genius, but there's like 8 different types of like sections. I think 8 or 10, I forgot which ones. But linguistics was one of them. It's like, for some people that's just the natural thing. But it's so hard, like when I guess we're in school and all they really do is like the book smarts. Like that's how we're judged, or how we're what's called assessed, right? With our intelligence. When really, like if there's like a linguistic school, like specifically where they harness your, it makes me think of I don't know if you follow the X-Men, but like that the
Oh,
school.
cool.
What's that?
School for gifted youngsters.
Exactly, and just kind of like hone in with those skills. Because like if you learn, I think it was 5 languages, just in the regular system. Like imagine if there was actually a system for you to really like, try every language. You might be speaking 20 languages. I don't know. It's very difficult for me. I know they say that like learning languages is easier as a kid. So I was
Yeah.
born in the Philippines, so I was raised in Tagalog until I moved here when I was 4, and my parents were like, "We never taught you English. You just learned it from watching TV." And I don't really necessarily remember that, but for sure at that time it was like Power Rangers and stuff. So my first English words were probably like "It's morphin' time," but,
Yeah.
but yeah, I don't remember, which is interesting to me though. And I kind of wish I kept my ability to speak Tagalog, and it's probably in there somewhere for me, but I have to practice more. And yeah, which I haven't yet. You told me to practice. Told me not to practice with family, right? It was like you got to practice other folks.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
I always tell people about confidence versus competence.
What's that mean?
So the idea is that, as you said, it's probably in there somewhere. Have you been pushed? Like, have you really had to? So
Okay.
much of what holds us back is how people react. I didn't start really trying to learn until I was 20. So,
Really? Oh
yeah,
snap. Okay.
yeah, it's like, you hear it here and there, but if family laughs at you, well, you don't want to do that again. You don't want to be laughed at, especially at that formative self-conscious age. So you focus on doing what gets you a more positive reaction, whatever that might be.
Yeah,
So if I cannot do something without getting laughed at, I'm not going to do it.
for
But
sure.
then part of being away for college was that pressure, peer pressure, but I suppose from a slightly negative motivation, I found a positive goal, and it's you have to think about why you're doing it. Going back to what you had said about schools and areas of discipline, they say, "Oh, you'll never use that." When kids complain about math, "Oh, I'm not gonna need that in real life."
Yeah.
That idea, like, what's geometry for? But if you see that family members will treat you differently if you learn, or just the gratitude of strangers. I've talked to random people and just seeing the light in their eyes, the comfort they derive from my efforts. When you have that balance between my my struggle versus your struggle, maybe I will be the one to struggle today. Being the first one born here, I thought about that, like, maybe I should be the one to have a hard time, and I'll make it a little easier for you. It's like, if I can give you the opportunity to speak in your first language, maybe that will have such an impact on your day. And it's just, I can see that, just the weight lifted off of someone, and
Tell you,
I
yeah, no,
can
no,
trust them.
I got you, man. And what I want to tell you is that I think that you know your efforts is like would means more than I feel like you could even be aware of, right? Because in my thought, it's like I'm not gonna say I'm never gonna have that moment, because I would like to learn a language and be able to reciprocate that respect. But I think someone from a different culture, seeing someone speak their language is like the ultimate sign of respect, right? And it's very like I don't know if you get this, but when you do communicate and they see you, they're shocked. They have confusion. They're like, this person can can talk like that, and then it's like, oh, instant homies kind of moment. So like, I respect this dude because he took time to learn my culture, learn how I speak, especially when we live in America, where it's like, I'm not bashing on the English language, but that's what
Yeah.
people want everyone to speak, and I'm like, yeah. So I just think that your efforts show a little bit more like in the scale of humanity versus like bad humanity. You give them hope for humanity when you when you show that you've learned their language, and I'm not saying it's
Yeah.
impossible for me, but yeah, I'm not there yet.
Well, I just say you're still alive, so it can't be too late.
Oh, still alive, can't be too late. Yeah, I agree, man.
But really, it can be a slippery slope with the concept of, hey, this outsider chose to make the effort and learn my language, because it can be, is this an outsider on the basis of country of birth, or
mm,
or is this outsider based on, I I have only one Filipino parent,
mm,
or what about those outsiders who have a kind of problematic motivation? When someone learns about your language and your people, and it's just honestly kind of ick, like I was having a hard time finding somewhere to practice Japanese, so I looked on Meetup. When I went to go find the people, went to Meetup, I was approaching the group, and I saw from afar it was just all white dudes with long hair, and I just had this vibe like, these are people looking for anime girls, and just,
mm,
I don't want to ascribe sincerity automatically to someone trying to learn our language. It could be it could be someone like that who just has one of those fetishes.
yeah, yeah. No, you're right.
Or yeah, or it could be a missionary, and I definitely don't want to trust that, because I've met those, like, oh yeah, I've been to. I was like, oh okay, and then you keep talking like, oh ew, like, no, I don't want to hear anymore. Like, you went there to proselytize, or maybe it's a soldier, and just, I remember this guy approaching me, telling me he was in the military, and he thought he knew all about where I had come from, and told me what my mom was.
Wow, that's intense, man. And you're right.
Yes,
Like,
when people are curious about your culture, okay, but let's look a little deeper than that. It's
that's
motivations and intentions.
for sure, for sure. And you just hella grounded me, right? Like I just went off on how great it must be to learn all these languages and be able to speak to people. But as far as like, you know, realizing the reality of it, that's very true. I'm too. I can be very optimistic, and as I try to be pragmatic, I'm pretty naive as well. So I mean, if
I don't want to shoot down the optimism, because yeah, I mean, what I've experienced living here is just, I came to California for language exposure, and the amazing thing is, no matter what, a job here will give you that opportunity. I mean, even my first job here was a cashier at Ross, and you just think that that's the bottom of it, right?
hmm
But it gave me an opportunity for 3 languages every day. And
mm,
I had to think, like, what is exposure, what is beneficial, what is a positive environment.
for sure, for sure.
And it's like, even though, hey, this is minimum wage, and we don't have legal rights to breaks quite yet in the timeline.
Yeah.
No, at least I'm getting opportunity, because if you're not proactive, you might not find the chance to use your languages. But you put yourself in the right place, and then people approach you.
And
They ask you, do you speak? And you say yes. And they just are so thankful. And it's really touching.
it's why we I think communication is so important, right? And knowing the language definitely makes that communication a lot smoother, cleaner. And yeah, and that's why I think people would get excited, like, oh my god, I can talk to this person like normal. And
people treat me so differently. Like when I show, it's like, oh, okay, now we can be friends, I guess, because they get certain ideas based off my features.
I understand. It's interesting for me, before we move on, and we should move on, but like growing up with my parents being immigrants and them, like, native language is Tagalog, right? They always, try to speak English to me. And one thing I never realized really was, like, growing up, it sounded normal. Like, it sounded like normal English to me, but really my friends would tell me, like, yo, your parents got like some
Right.
really thick accents. And I'm like, for real? Like, I think their English is pretty good. When I've worked in different workplaces, and have had other immigrants I worked with, I felt like it was easier for me to understand them because of how my parents would speak to me, right? Like in that kind of strong accent English, but like it works. And then for me, when I meet these older immigrant folks, even though I don't speak their language, I think they hella appreciate that I could still understand their broken English, like it was like regular English.
Yeah, because you have experience with, let's say, alternative types of English. So
yes, not broken English. My bad.
yeah. Well, we're gonna speak broken types of other things, right? So it can cut both ways, but sometimes what happens is it really is you feel when people laugh at you, and then you realize, okay, maybe I have laughed at them.
Yeah. And we could talk about comedy too, and how that kind of affects with linguistics, because when I hear an accent, like I do think it's funny, but I'm not thinking of it as like a negative way on this person. It's just like, oh, this is how I'm perceiving it.
Well, it's being on the side of it. I want to frame it as laughing from a place of love.
Yeah.
And also that it is yours, so you would protect. That's why it can be tricky when you have ethnic comedians.
Yeah, very tricky.
You enjoy it, but then it's like, well, if we share this with other people, then they're gonna share with their friends, which means they do a rendition of your relatives, and you have to think about what it means to share cultural humor.
True, very true. I mean, like I could take it for granted when you were just saying, like, it made me think about if I was on stage and I was a comedian and I had imitated like another Asian country's accent, right? And it's like, are they looking at me like regular people who don't know the difference between Asians might be like, oh, that's funny. But then people who do know I'm Filipino and not Chinese, but doing a Chinese accent, they might be like, yo, this is not cool. But yeah, that made me think about it.
Yeah, I would say something. It's like, look, let's just stick to making fun of our own, because you'll find the ones who spend a lot of time making fun of others aren't sure how to make fun of themselves, because they've lost themselves. Those people who are so interested in our culture might not really be sure about their own lineage.
Interesting. That's true. Um, but all right, Andrew, we got to get to the warm up. That was just after the how you been doing. But
Oh, well, I go for it.
well, we just flow with it, man. I don't really have any hard times, but I do just want to see what answer you got for this next question in the warm up, which is, what would you like the audience to know about you? We kind of talked a little bit about yourself, but if there's anything that you just want to let the folks know before we dive deeper into this interview, go for it.
Well, do you have any framing for that? I mean,
Some
I
people, yeah,
I
yeah.
can talk about interests, or I can talk about what. Yeah.
So I like to think of it as like if you had the opportunity to set a disclaimer for yourself, like when you meet new people. Like for me, I would probably tell people like, um, I'm very gullible, so please like don't try to take advantage with sarcasm. I am like very people minded, solution minded, like to be creative. So if you want to talk about that, that's dope. But yeah, so that's usually my disclaimer. And like I would say like feel free. I don't judge, so have a crazy sense of humor. I'll probably laugh with it, but maybe there's some jokes that I just don't vibe with. But yeah, so that would be something I would say with this answer. Go for it.
Okay. Well, I would say in one area there are certain phrasings that people get used to that I have to push back on, like hearing the way people use native, or hearing the way people say American, or just why doesn't anyone know what nationality actually means?
Hmm.
Why is it when someone says, "What's your nationality?" the other person says Asian, and well, it's not a country.
Yeah.
So I try to tell people, let's stop saying American and see if we can express ourselves better. I mean, there are other things, but I realize that in order to talk about something, you got to say that word you don't want to hear. But the idea being, there are things that I comment on, and sometimes that's too much for people.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
The whole idea of like that's not what I meant, or can't you take a joke, or whatever, man, that type of like, no, there are some things I just you use a term, I'm going to make us talk about it.
I see. I see. Well, definitely call me out on any terms that I feel like you feel like is being misused, or I'm not being aware of the term as much. Um
But also there is that aspect of the social script. How do you come back from that correction? Because some people cannot handle even just that bit of adversarial energy. Like I tried to not say what's that supposed to mean, because it does sound like an antagonistic saying. It does feel like an interest in arguing and escalation more than resolution. But
yeah, yeah.
but
I
I'll
mean,
try to find another way to say what was that. But just after correcting someone, or commenting, how do you move on from that? Because that can be very difficult. Sometimes you don't call someone out on something because you're not sure what to do next.
no, for sure.
It can be such a conversation stopper. So it's a balance, because you're trying to feel out what the other person has experienced with socially.
True, true. And when when you say that, right, I think of the experiences I've had when like there's been a hard, someone says, what do you mean by that? Or that kind of comes up in a conversation, right? Normally when it's with people that I kind of know pretty good, I want to say I know somebody fully, but there's been instances where like if that friend group, circle, workplace understands that person or kind of just knows, oh, that's who they are, I see the movement from that pretty smooth. Like it's just okay, well, that's expected, we know that person is like that, and we'll just keep moving along, and conversation seems to flow still. But I will say in moments of like strangers meeting for the first time and that phrase comes up, yes, I think people get defensive real fast, and it's crazy. Like I hope you have a place where you feel free to be able to, not, I don't want to say attack, I would say like question or like address how words are being used. But yeah, definitely on 34 questions, definitely a place where you don't have to worry about those things.
Okay, yeah, because it can be so tricky. I don't feel I was raised to communicate that way, so I did have a serious stutter growing up. I just had to learn that what I wanted to say was okay, instead of focusing so much on the possibility of the other person being really hurt or just awkward.
Yeah, I gotcha. Well, thank you for opening up on this first answer. The next form of question is going to be, how would you like to be honored? So if there is a way I could express the energy you possess and say, like this one's for Andrew, well, what sort of act could I do?
Oh, I was worried that sounded like a eulogy question.
Well, I think it's implied, but I don't want to put it out there. It's more like if you go move to another country and your friends want to celebrate your birthday, what could they do? Be like, oh, this one's for Andrew,
Okay, so what kind of atmosphere or energy do I want at let's say, a birthday celebration?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, so one of my favorite birthdays was when I rented out a community center and invited artists to table, selling their illustrations or handcrafts or whatever else, and trying to get a variety of expressions, and then bringing in food and family flying down. I always have wanted a gathering for me to have the people from all types of different areas of my life. So the friends from work can meet the friends from volunteering, can meet my Star Trek friends. And it fascinates me to see how they get together and the new things I learn about them because of the energy that came out unpredictably from intersecting with a separate part of my life.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, the idea of bringing people together and people telling each other, this is how I met him, and just that
stories. Yeah,
that warm feeling of people.
I got you.
Saying, yeah, what I contribute to community, or just how important Star Trek is.
I got you. That's interesting, man. I've always thought about that. Like the idea, I like to think of it as universes colliding, right? Like I have my family universe, I have my work universe, all these different universes coming to this one place. Seems a little egotistical too, because it kind of makes makes me the center point, and everyone kind of is there because of me. But Yeah,
Right.
yeah, I do like that idea, because if you are able to, if I could see that, like my family working with my work friends, or my homies out of work, it's like, do they all like, I'm actually curious if they all think I'm the same person, right? Like, am I the same person with my family? Am I the same person at work? Am I the same person with my friends? And if they all kind of like, notice that difference. Because I'll tell you, one time that happened to me. Like, I had people from different universes come together. Someone was like, dude, you're a social butterfly. You're never like that. And I'm all like, really? Like, in my mind, I thought I was always like this. But yeah, which is a trip. But you were going to say something? My bad.
Well, just to assuage the notion of egocentricity, because how I'm meeting people, like the volunteerism. Like, okay,
Mm,
maybe there are people who are in community work to get pats on the back, but there's only so much you can put into something before it's real, you know? And then, I mean, the very concept of Star Trek or other fandoms, or my comic book friends, like, I do think the realms I've chosen demonstrate collective mindedness.
mm,
The idea that it's so much better when we work together. So maybe on the surface, I'm gathering all these people so they can sing my praises, extol my virtues, make me feel like the most generous person, but it's still a foundation of, I enjoy being out there and supporting causes. And a term I heard was Trektivism, meaning that if you're a fan of Star Trek, you are trying to get us toward that vision of unity in the future. If the philosophy of the show means something to you, then you are out there in your community knocking down barriers. And
that is,
so it does all fit. It's like, yeah, all these people are gathered to talk about me, but how did I collect them?
hey, that's deep, man. I didn't know the Star Trek was that deep. My
Yeah,
yeah,
my essays. Shit.
you got some essays? Okay, shoot me some essays, man.
Yeah.
I'll take a read. Yeah, because I guess I haven't had these conversations with Trekkies and kind of like understand more about what the whole story was about. That's cool.
Oh,
A
yeah.
universe.
I've done guided viewings and given people writing exercises just to get there. I was a teacher briefly, and I used quotes from it. Just the idea that you aren't just watching people talk about something and their ideas, but that we can put these into action. And when we hang out to watch episodes, got to have discussions as well.
You got it, man. You got it. That's like
Yeah, you can't be like, yeah, that was cool, explosions and shit. Yeah, no,
yeah. No, you got to break it down. You got to break down the script, the shots, choices in the filming. But yeah, yeah. No, you got to break it down. Uh,
yeah.
I got you. And then my last question for you in the warm up is, on a scale from 1 to 10, how well do you know yourself?
Well, I've learned so much about myself with the health challenges I've had in recent years. When I mentioned to you briefly in your I was gonna say Google form, but I guess it's not Google, but your form.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, just I my first time with cancer was 2012, And ever since then, I've gotten the feedback that I am a much more grateful person.
Mm.
I like to think that I have found a different form of optimism, a different outlook, since now I've beaten it twice. It's just this idea that when you are in pain, when you're incapacitated, you learn who can handle being around you without falling apart themselves, and who can handle you falling apart.
Holy shit, dude. Sorry, that is intense, dog. Go ahead though.
Is it you really you have to allow yourself that period of self-pity. It's mourning. It's mourning who you were and what you never will have again. If you cannot let yourself experience that negative emotion, then when are you going to? I had to decide, like, I'm going to cry for myself. I'm going to seek sympathy, and I just I cannot keep I can't keep going without indulging, just who am I putting on this strong show for?
Yeah.
So you learn not only the emotional strengths you possess, but who around you has those. Because once you announce that you have something, once you talk about cancer, then people around you are going to be more likely to open up about what they feel.
Yeah.
And there were a couple people in my life who transitioned from acquaintances to friends because, hey, now we can make tumor jokes. We both got these things and we can keep taking them out, but we'll get, they say nodules when it's a small tumor, but, or you can say growth, but there's always going to be something inside. You can't get it all out. You just have to accept that that's part of who you are. You mourn the loss of who you were. And I just realized it's so much easier to become an optimistic person if I indulge the sadness in order to make that progress. I just had to stop denying myself that. I just thought I can't move forward without the honesty of self-pity. I found it's easier to classify it mentally and emotionally as finite if I let it out, if I just let it happen.
Yeah.
So it's also a journey of learning who your real friends are, because some people just think it's too depressing that I have had cancer twice. So it's just like, well, maybe being around me makes you sad, but shit, I'm the one who has it. So, like, okay, I guess I don't need you. It's just too heavy for you, because
Yeah.
what I'm going through is too much for you.
Damn.
Well, that's just bye bye right there.
Yeah, man. That is tough. I
Yeah.
There's some questions I want to ask you about it, but
Yeah.
this is not related to the illness, but a similar situation I was
Yeah.
in, which made me feel like a bad friend. But like you see a friend who's depressed about something, And like for me, I've been one of those people who like, took steps backwards because I was like, oh man, like I'm sorry, but I can't, there's nothing I can do to really help except like, hear about it, over and over again. And, if that friend is listening, I hope they know that it was like not anything personal. It was just more so like, yeah, I need to step back. But for you as a person going through it, um, and hearing like, yeah, maybe those are like, I wasn't a person that my friend needed in their life at that time. Like if I was gonna act that way, maybe it was better that, and we did drift apart after that too. I think there was like, some reflection on their part. But that,
Yeah, you're learning your capacity for better or for worse. Both sides learn
true.
your range. What is your range?
And then the other thing I wanted to make, what you made me think about was like, if I was in a situation where I found out I was ill, I think in the beginning for sure I'd be the kind of person to like not tell anybody. Like I would try to keep it a secret for as long as possible. And like from hearing what you were saying was like, that's almost, I mean, for me it's a lot to do with like, yeah, I guess I don't want people to bring it up. I don't want to talk about it. I just want to live my life the same way as much as possible until something happens. But I guess go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say it just goes back to you gotta let it out, because yes, there might come a time that you're tired of talking about it, but if you consider the possibility that there's someone you can help by talking about it, maybe the person I'm talking to has a loved one with the exact same cancer. Now I'm a resource. I always want to consider that, because when I got my diagnosis, a friend gave me a phone number and said, my friend has the same thing as you. Maybe you guys can talk. And that made
See,
such a difference. You know, you can be that for someone if you just build a little more tolerance for sharing your story. I mean, it's still discretionary. Like, do I have that energy today? Am I in that emotional location today? But just in general, you might be able to offer yourself to a friend of a friend.
sure, man. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I was thinking, do you feel like you know your story pretty well to like talk about it? Because that's one thing I think I heard. I forgot which celebrity said it, but they're like, if you're gonna try to become famous or a celebrity or something, you gotta get used to telling your story, because everyone's gonna ask you to tell that story over and over again. So for you, do you feel like
Yeah.
you feel pretty like you got that story down, or you're still trying to piece it together?
Well, I mean, there are more pieces. It's just I feel like with different people, you recollect different details. I wouldn't want to get into that headspace of trying to tell every part of it every time, because that's when it can become more about my need to be thorough than
Mm,
what you need or are ready for as my listener. Because a storyteller gotta feel out the audience. Maybe I'm halfway through what I want to recite, but I read you and it's time to move on. Maybe it's hitting close to home. You don't want to say it, but there's just something passing across your face and I need to rein it in,
mm-hmm.
you know. But as far as familiarity with self, yes, I did not answer your question precisely with a number.
No worries, man. But what would you say if you gonna throw a dart at the board?
Well, I want to go for 8.
That's solid, man. That's solid. I think everybody hopes to be around the 8, 9, 10 range. You know.
I don't think anyone should say 10 because that's just a level of arrogance that you cannot. How can you be there, really? Like we could go down a checklist of what you haven't done yet, but then that could descend into competitive energy, and it's just you see what people have experienced in terms of successes and tragedies.
For sure.
So I just try to, sometimes I'm talking about cancer because people are reacting strangely to my dietary choices, or that I have to keep stretching my neck because the wound always will hurt and spasm. So I mean, you'll see my mannerisms. I've gotten to a point of not explaining it right away, and I used to need to, but it's like, man, it just happens too often and it hurts too much. So it's like, whatever. Y'all can just think I have a tick, or I mean,
No.
I suppose the way it is, but you feel out what you again are ready to talk about today, or the person you're talking to, what that person's ready to receive. It's tricky because really, how are you evaluating? But I really have had to try to get that down when talking about myself, because either it's depressing or it's overwhelming or it's too familiar.
It's too real. Yeah, it can be too real for some folks.
Yeah, because I don't know, did something happen to your loved one today? And maybe I should not. But it's just, sometimes I get the reaction like, well, at least it was thyroid. That hardly counts. Like, at least it wasn't like, one of those serious cancers.
Wow, that's kind of fucked up, right? I don't know. That
Yeah,
person.
yeah. So you think about, sometimes sharing leads to the oppression Olympics. Sometimes sharing leads to, man, I've seen bigger scars, or at least you aren't missing your blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Or does everyone know what a thyroid is? So yeah, you'll get surprising reactions from sharing, and a few are going to be negative.
I see, and maybe that's why I don't share it a lot. Now that I think about it, I'm besides the podcast, man. I'm a pretty like quiet person in real life, and
I always want to encourage sharing, just to go back to, what if now you have a friend with the exact same cancer who I can talk to now and be there for. You just never know how you can be a resource, and the first step is putting yourself out there by sharing.
yeah, you can't assume. I assume a
Yeah.
lot. That's something I'm working on. But yeah, man, I just want to let you know we got about 12, 15 minutes ish left in the podcast. Don't worry. I know we didn't get through a whole bunch of it today, but always welcome to come back to finish it out with a part two. But I do want to move on to this next part, which is
Okay.
the icebreaker. All right. Here we go. Icebreaker. So just a heads up. You have a choice. Would you rather do a word association or a this or that?
Association.
All right. And then I'm going to put 34 seconds on the board. When I click start, I'm going to give you a word. You give me the first word that comes to mind. All right. And I'm going to ask you about maybe one or two afterwards. Here we go. In 3, 2, 1, love.
I think of family, or I think of that struggle to relate to someone you don't know yet.
Failure.
being hard on yourself, but also remembering to have definitions of progress and success.
Life.
Other planets.
Past.
Accepting yourself and remembering to process and feel, but find that line between dwelling and sharing.
I got you. I do want to ask you about you said something that the second part when I said love, you said family. What was the second part? You remember? If it's cool, it's okay if you don't. I'm gonna listen to it.
There's always that family type and then the romantic type, and my health conditions have played a large part in the barrier, because it's scary for a lot of people, because if someone sees my scar and she asks, oh well, I'll just say it, but maybe that's overwhelming, I don't know what she's been through.
Yeah.
Or maybe somebody told me, what if it comes back? What if you get it again? That would break my heart. So does that mean you cannot love someone with a health history? Because who knows when cancer will return?
Yeah.
So it's the idea of love does come back to health for me, because that's been a challenge, because in addition to the cancer, I also have a muscle disease. So I have to consider whether this person needs sugarcoating, or should I go for incremental disclosure, or should I just not say anything until the topic forces its way to the forefront? Do you want to get ahead of something, get something out of the way, or do you want to just not talk about it because maybe you never will need to talk about it?
Damn.
What it just never comes up, and then, oh well, that's safely stuffed in the closet, and I did not need to jump the gun and say, hey, cancer, maybe I can keep it to myself and not come across as a downer, because sometimes telling the truth will make someone describe me as depressing.
Yeah.
I try to be nonchalant with it, because it's old now, so I can just say, I had it and it's gone. Well, it sucks, but yeah, that was then.
Yeah, I'm a survivor, right? Like, you a survivor.
Yeah, but it's like trying to feel out, does this person need me to downplay it and be nonchalant? Like, what do you need? So just talking about love in the romantic sense, it comes back to health challenges, because how many people can handle honesty? So I usually will go for incremental disclosure. But the fact remains, the pursuit of love eventually requires talking about what has happened to me. Yeah, and maybe that's too much for someone. Yeah. Even if you might subscribe to the school of, well, get it out the way and at least now. I don't know about all that. I'm not automatically on that same page.
Understand.
It's a generalization. Like, I gotta feel out, what does this person need in communication style or level of sharing. But yeah, just the topic of love, that just goes right back to health, because
Oh, no, I got you,
it's hard,
man.
it's hard to be honest.
It is. It is. And I just want to say thank you for opening up, man. I I can't remember what phrasing you used, but it definitely made me want to dig a little deeper into that in your answer. And now when we rewatch this at some point, it's gonna be like, oh, that's what you had said originally, and you just got real deep into it. But thank you. I want to say thank you for opening up.
Yeah.
All right, dog. We got about 5 minutes left. I want to pause there and kind of like, when we pick up with the part 2, we'll get to the Wheel of Fate. We'll get to the closeout part, which is important. But I do want to ask you right now, what would be your question for the next guest on 34 Questions?
Oh, well, I'm always going to ask, you got any kind of framing for me?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
the way I would frame this is, one, it's a way that I like to connect my guests, right? Like, you're a guest today, next person may be different, and I like to use, I want to connect you with them in some way. So what question you would generally ask a stranger, but also it's a question I like to answer at the end of the podcast. So I don't know if there's a question you felt like that came up for you that you want to ask me, but yeah, you could take it either way.
Well, I work with a lot of young people, and I always see that people want to jump ship for a place with better pay. And this emphasis on how can I make more money seems to lose sight of, what do you want? So in getting to know somebody, I want to hear, what is your life outside of work and sleep and eating? Not necessarily what would you do if money were no object, but just professional development is an important concept, but what else are you doing? When someone asks, does your job have room for advancement? I don't want to give an immediate answer, because I don't think it really is that. What if advancement is not a promotion or a raise, but what you are getting out of it creatively? What are you learning that's different? What is an aspect of communication that you have to use that is not familiar in your immediate family setting? So I try to get people to talk about what they enjoy. When a friend of mine is depressed, I say, I want a list of 5 topics or passions or hobbies or interests or ideas that make you happy, that make you feel centered. When you have a bad day or you get some bad news, you can go back to this top 5 list for comfort. What do you do? Not something that involves other people or going somewhere physically, or maybe not food. So, we're not engaging in destructive eating, but what inspires you? Just trying to combat a depressing day with this foundation of 5 passions. That's what I ask people, so that they get their spirits up, and I know I've done my duty as a friend.
I got you, Andrew, and I appreciate it. And I felt like you clarified your question with a lot of other questions, and you for me at least, you eliminated going outside, and eliminated has to do anything with other people. So when I narrowed that down for myself, I think what it is I do life outside of work, right? And it doesn't do with people, so not my family, my friends, or my partner. It doesn't do with going outside, so it makes me think of what I'd be doing if I'm in home or indoors and at home. It makes me think of quarantine, right? Like, because I felt like that was a time where a lot of folks were doing it. And so the story is that, my friend was telling me like, yo man, I just met a true creative, right? Like I could give a person whatever materials, whatever idea, and they make it happen like within 10 minutes, right? I didn't tell him at the time, but I felt a little slighted because I was like, I thought I was a creative or like, I thought you perceive me as a creative, right? And because for me, that's what it is I like to do. Like if you're going to ask me what's my life outside of work, I feel this need to make things, right? Whether that's by writing, because my first dream was to be a rapper, and like I was expressing myself through the written word and writing lyrics down, right? And then like after that, I tried to create a clothing brand because I like making designs with a message and trying to promote that and put that out there in the world. And then even now, like I think with the podcast, it helps me be creative with the filming and the writing and stuff. But I know I'm not supposed to include people, but I think it's a creative way to get to know people. Like having a platform where I can just have these deep ass questions that I can't normally ask people at a party or at the bar, is a creative way to have these conversations. So yeah, man, for me, what is my life outside of work is, man, I gotta make something happen, like physically, whatever. Yeah, so that's my answer to that, and thank you for that question because it does make me reflect on how much it means to me to make stuff. But yeah,
I would say even just writing questions for the show that doesn't really involve other people because that's your aspect. Pose the questions is what involves other people, but your questions aren't necessarily about your guest. So it's creative writing. It absolutely is.
Yeah, I guess that's a good way to put it.
You're not considering the other person. You're just, this is the type of discussion I want to have, regardless of with whom.
That is a good way to put it. And I think that's the other side of that coin, right? Because in my mind, I'll be thinking like, oh, I made these questions for my guest or for my, whoever I'm talking to. Because, in my mind, I feel like that's a gift I'm giving people. But yes, on the other side, for me, the selfish side is, yeah, these are the conversations I want to have. And if you don't want to talk about this, then you might not be able to be on the podcast. But yeah, that is true. That is the selfish side of the coin.
I would even say that's not necessarily selfish because you have a purpose and an intention to listen, but your phase of the process. I mean, that's what it is. It's not. Yeah, I just always want to discourage that any type of potential self-deprecation because I don't think it's selfish. It's nourishing. You want to have that type of discussion because it's an energy in which you want to be. That's where you want to exist, and it's definitely communal.
Yeah, man. I might be a Trekkie and I just don't know it yet, but I got you.
I'll send you a brochure and an application.
I got you. Does it come with a badge? I would love a badge. But anyway.
we can discuss Velcro versus pin.
Gotcha. All right, man. Before I let you go, man, I want to thank you again for stopping by. I think this was a great part one. I hope we can find more time to let's get through the wheel. Let's get through the closeout questions because those are important too. And yeah, man, before I let you go, my last question for you, question that ties every episode together, which is 100, 200, 300 years from now, our descendants are watching this video. What would you like to tell them?
Man, tell me we made it to space. I need to know that we found other people. I want to know that we did not have to have more world wars in order to find unity. I want to know that we normalized differences without abolishing them. The solution is not to keep mixing until we're all the same. Have we found a way to cherish and progress? Yeah, I want to see other worlds, and I need to be a translator out there too.
Would you freeze yourself if they told you, like, hey, we have the technology to freeze yourself, but I don't. That's like a long shot. We don't know if in the future they're gonna find the technology to defrost us and be like with our with our spirit and soul still intact. But would you do it? Would you say like freeze me up?
You have to think about who are you asking? Whom are you asking? Because if someone has a condition, then it's totally different in framing and scope. I have a spinal muscular disease for which there is no cure. So maybe because it's a way to go out on my own terms. Because at some point, I'm going to have difficulty speaking because the tongue is a muscle. At some point, I'm not going to be able to live independently. But maybe you can freeze me and I'll wake up on the Enterprise.
Yeah, man. If we ever get to that point, I hope there's gonna be a way to do it. So, like I said.
Yeah, so I'm not thinking about how I go. I'm thinking about what's next, which I do believe are different pathways.
Gotcha. Any last things you'd like to add, Andrew, before we head out? Like, you want to plug your projects and stuff that you're working on? If you don't, that's fine too.
Oh yeah, well you know I always got something. That's why I put all those things in your hand at the
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, well, this coming Saturday there will be a Star Trek improv show at Stageworks, which is a theater on Valencia between 15th and 16th here in the city. So that's 7 p.m. Saturday, the 24th. I can send a link for the show notes, but I want to make sure people know that it's not about how much of a fan you are, but just that improv is fun and point is to be silly. There's no gatekeeping. Just I hope people can come out and support because, hey, maybe I'm in it. Who knows? What matters is we're all in uniform, and you want to see that.
Got you, Andrew.
Well, in addition, I have to talk about the podcast because I was what I gave you that bookmarker. So if there's anyone out there who is bilingual and has a speech impediment, we would love to interview you for an audio documentary that should come out later this year, or we're not sure yet about the timeline, but yes, we're looking for people to interview, and then we bring on a guest host to be an intermediary to support the main subject. So again, to recap, the improv event is called Phasers on Stun. That's the name of the group. phasersonstun.com. And then the podcast is called Proud Stutter. So just looking for people who want to come on the show, be interviewed, and share their experiences. Because I'll tell you that speaking, as we say, fluently is so different depending on language. I found a way to calm myself and get through speech in English because of a favorite song that always got me hyped, but also stabilized. But it's harder to find in other languages. Just going back to that idea of the immigrants are laughing at me, and I don't want to put myself out there. It takes a lot of confidence to do that. So my stutter is rare in English, but you'll hear it in other languages unless I just cover it up by switching. Sometimes that's the benefit of our Taglish ways. You don't know why I am switching, but you know in your head when a sound is blocked and it's just not going to come out, and you don't know how people are going to treat you if you just push through it. Sometimes that's what it takes. You know you're going to get stuck, but maybe you'll try to push through anyway, and maybe it will be a display, but you decide in the moment, do I want to try, or am I going to switch languages and give up? So yeah, just want to create that space, and if people identify with those categories, you can come be interviewed on the show, and we're going to start doing a live support group as well. So that is Proud Stutter.
Proud Stutter, y'all. Make sure to check it out, and I will link it. I say it all the time, and I gotta get better at the habit of linking everything my guest tells me to link. I'm gonna do it. Andrew, thank you again. Okay. Thank you again for stopping by. It was a great conversation. Hopefully come back. I want to thank all the folks out there who tuned in. If you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube, definitely appreciate your time as well. Please remember to reach out, reach forward. As always, much love. And we'll catch you guys next time on 34 Questions. Peace.
Thank you.